death, or the servicing of families in time of bereavement, to become, quotes, an industry.
It's getting so expensive. I just spoke with a friend whose father passed away and it cost him over $2,000. The family can't afford it, but they have to afford it.
Jeff Royce and his father Elliot are members of a Minneapolis congregation which decided to try to create an alternative funeral. One that would be simple, traditional, and inexpensive. Dora Zeidenweber is sewing a shroud. She joined this group for a different reason.
My father died in 1960, and we made arrangements for his funeral. We knew that he would have liked a traditional Jewish funeral, meaning a plain pine box. I just couldn't go against what society expected. I don't know really why. I just wasn't ready to be that different. We used a very modest casket, but nevertheless, we did use a casket. And afterwards, it has always bothered me that I did not conform to my father's wishes.
And agenda.
Working together, they developed a funeral that costs only about $400. But more important to them, it was a funeral that met their emotional needs and spiritual concerns. It was a funeral that treated death as part of life. A funeral is the third largest purchase after a house and a car that the average American makes in a lifetime, and it is perhaps the most difficult. Most of us make that purchase totally unprepared, in a state of confusion with no time to compare prices, wondering what is the right thing to do. We seek the advice of the funeral director, and we follow customs unique to the American funeral industry. For many, this is the one time in our lives when cost is no concern. Rich woods and lavish flowers are expressions of our love and respect. Funerals have developed into a $4 billion industry. Sophisticated technology and professional hands remove the unpleasant fact of death from our sight. The modern American funeral seeks to make the whole experience as painless as possible.
It seems as if people go through a variety of motions in order to stifle honest grief. The mourners are really discouraged from crying. People are discouraged from involving themselves in the process of burying the dead and handling the dead. And there are times when people should allow their emotions to be a little bit more open, and they should have an opportunity to grapple with the reality of death and to deal with it. And only when dealing with it and confronting it can you hope to overcome the pain which death really creates, rather than seeking to suppress it or to sublimate it. And this ultimately must create a lot of discomfort later on. And many people who have suffered bereavement describe how it took them a long time to really come to terms with their loss.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu.
Rabbi Goodman looked to tradition to find an alternative to what disturbs so many at modern funerals. He reminded his congregation of their departure from the ancient laws. Laws that say, in death all are equal. Burial in a simple cotton shroud, in a plain wood coffin placed directly into the earth. This Minneapolis congregation had no desire to go back to life 5,000 or even 100 years ago. But that command, dust to dust, and the thought of the community taking responsibility for burying their own, struck a responsive chord in many. So Rabbi Goodman called a meeting of those interested. They met and committed themselves to study the problem.
And we decided that it made sense to take our energies and devote them to a return to tradition, which also meant involving people as part of the community in the preparation of the body for death, as well as reaching out to the family and giving them some very direct support.
Nobody thought we'd ever get off the ground with this thing. They said people are not going to inconvenience themselves to get involved with something like death. People are afraid of death. In fact, you know, the American society is the denial society regarding death. But I've grown in my respect for people and their willingness to get involved.
Last time we called, there were some people who were...
They formed themselves into committees, each responsible for a different part of the process. One, to find a mortuary that would provide the essential services at a reasonable cost. Another, to sew their own shrouds. A third, to purify the body. And still another, to provide counselors for the bereaved family.
How we did, and we'll get into your items too.
Well, I can report, I can report on the Sudet family because I did the family. And
they call themselves the Chevra Kavod Hamet, the Society to Honor the Dead. Religious laws were scrupulously researched, but the biggest headache was working out the mechanical details. They worried about everything, from getting the obituary correct to making sure the grave was open.
I hear all the committee reports and I rewrite the damn checklist, 13th revision. That you forget things, and I made one major error.
Would you like to stand and confess?
No, but I'm just saying this in terms of that we really have. My confession. Yes, I didn't call Robert Walk early enough in the morning, and I let too long a time lapse before I contacted him. Yes.
When you called me at about, it was exactly 1 o'clock because my kids were leaving. And when I called...
There are still some problems, but things have come a long way from that first meeting 18 months ago when 20 men and women met wondering what, if anything, could be done.
There'll be a met and no grave. That was what came through to me, that, you know.
Yes.
Well, that's a very legitimate concern. I used to have nightmares about that.
So far, there have been no major slip-ups.
One of the members of the committee came over to me and said, you know, Rabbi, I'm in the lumber business, and I know a lot about carpentry. And after all, we're dealing with essentially six pieces of wood, 4 sides, a top and a bottom. And I don't think that should cost more than $45 to make. And what would you think if we offered every member of the congregation a free, traditional coffin at the time of death? Because at which point somebody said, well, what would it look like? So he said, if you really want to see, I have it in my station wagon. And he went out with his son. His son was also a member of the committee. And into the living room of this home, is where we're meeting at a private home, they brought this first simple wood coffin. And we all looked at it, and we gasped, because until then we were talking about death theoretically. It was abstract. And now for the first time we looked at something which was an artifact of death. And we squeamishly touched it and probed it, and finally somebody decided to get in it to see how it was sized. And of course, there was a lot of nervous tension and a lot of laughter, as there would be in a situation like that. And thus was born the concept, the synagogue providing the funeral.
The times I've attended funerals for friends, and I was appointed or asked to be a pallbearer, I felt such a thrill carrying my friends. More than words, I'm carrying them, doing the last thing for him. He can't do it himself. We have to carry him. The modern casket is so heavy, if anybody has had the privilege of carrying one, you really don't carry. All you do is hold it while they slip the mechanical devices under there so that they can transfer it from the hearse, let's say, to the graveside mechanism. They are so heavy, no average 6 men can carry them. So just as part of it, this casket that we've devised is so light that you can not only carry your friends, you can carry them a long distance. And why shouldn't Why should only men carry caskets? Why shouldn't women carry their friends too?
My father was a very religious man. I grew up in an Orthodox, traditional family, and we felt that this was what he would want, and certainly what we would want. In addition to that, the synagogue it is our synagogue, and there's nothing we felt like having your own do this. It got back to tradition, and that's exactly what we felt is what we would like.
We have a tradition among Jews that the body of a person is shown honor. A Hamet, a deceased, is shown Kavod, is shown honor. He or she is watched, not abandoned, not left alone, from the time of death until the time of burial. The people who do this are called the Shomrim, the guardians, the sentinels. We have put out a call. We now have a group of some 65 or 70 men, women, teenagers, who roster themselves for 12 periods and go to wherever the body is, usually the mortuary, and there they will sit.
Well, I thought, on the way there I'd be nervous, and not knowing what to expect, but I really wasn't. And we walked in and it was very quiet, and we said a prayer and just sat down. And I read about, the Jewish way and death and dying, and I read about the funeral and that, and it helped prepare me, and it took a lot of the mystery out of it, and it made me a lot more relaxed and more stronger and ready for it.
We get out to the cemetery, and the ultimate mitzvah, the ultimate commandment, the ultimate honor, the ultimate act of love is to bury the dead. When Abraham bought a plot of land for Sarah, the very, very first record of death and burial in the Bible, Abraham buys a plot of land for Sarah in order to bury her. And Jews have always taken great responsibility to bury their own. And the way this is done symbolically is that everyone who's at the cemetery is encouraged to shovel in some earth into the grave to help fill the grave. And the people who do this are the pallbearers, who normally are chosen because they're close to the family and the deceased. When they're told that this is part of the honor of being a pallbearer, part of the act of love, if they're so inclined. We have had grandchildren. We've had sons and daughters. One instance, we had a spouse, all of whom took a turn in shoveling some of the earth into the grave and helping to fill it. This too helps overcome part of the process of denial, because you're involved in the actual process of burying the dead and of saying farewell. And it's very, very difficult to do this. But in the doing it, you come to grips with the reality of your loss.
Well, at the gravesite, we each were given the chance to shovel dirt into the grave, and if I recall, I was probably the third one right after the rabbi, and that was very significant to me, I being the only grandson, and it's something that I just had to do. As much as I didn't want to, because I was holding back the tears, and I was watching dirt go into my grandfather's grave. It kills you, but I just had to do it. And afterwards, I felt good about it, as sad as I was. But the feeling was there that just made me do it.
That whole moment, wasn't easy, but it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be, It gives you strength to just go up there and do it for yourself, and without being told to do it. It helped me, I think,
I personally fulfilled something, and I just felt after my grandfather left that there was so much unfinished business, and this was kind of tying it up.
I explained to us and what it would do. Certainly the tending and the sitting with the body was very important to us, and in this case friends volunteered, our own children, and we felt certainly there was a link between the living and the dead, and we felt our children, it certainly was not it took the mysticism and I guess being scared maybe, and we felt it was a very good experience for them and for us, and I guess with all of it came a learning experience for us.
After the family has buried the dead, the family returns to their home for a 7-day period of mourning to accept condolence calls from friends and relatives. People come almost as brother and sister mourners. And the Talmud is very specific. One speaks to the bereaved about the deceased. One doesn't you don't try to take a person's mind off his loss or her loss, because the person who is sitting shiva, who's bereaved, knows why he's there. And we have found it to be very, very meaningful, as we've instructed people, to go in and share memories they may have of the deceased. And somebody comes in and says, well, I remember your father, a blessed memory, and I used to go to the house when I was a little boy or little girl, and he would give me milk and cookies, or he always had a smile, he always pinched my cheek. A little memory like that means so much to people when they themselves are bereaved, because it makes them feel that their father, their mother, their loved one really had impact beyond the immediate circle of the family. And that's a dimension of immortality that we all aspire to. And here we enable people to feel this about their own loved ones. And this, too, is part of the process of overcoming the denial of death.
Tradition says that when a person dies, that he or she must be ritually purified. Now, what does this mean? It means that they must be washed, and then a process of prayer and purification must be performed.
And we were discussing this problem and wondering whether indeed we could go and create a total model. And at this point, one member of the committee leaned over to me and said, Rabbi, can we count on you to do the ritual purification? And I have to tell you, I swallowed kind of hard, because I had never really had direct contact with a dead body. And I had all the fears and all of the blocks and all of the myths that everybody else has. But I understood that sometimes the pace of the leader is the pace of the game. And so I said, of course, maybe hoping against hope that I would never be involved. But of course, once the Chevra Kadisha, the Sacred Society, began to evolve, we started to study the process. It became apparent that everybody who had become part and parcel of this group, and at this time the group numbered some 35 people, would sooner or later be called.
We went through kind of a training period at the very beginning. We went to the mortuary one night. The mortician said that he happened to have a body there and would like to go in and touch it. And I was, of course, willing to go in and look at it, but I had certain reservations about touching it. The body happened to be embalmed. It was an older woman. My wife, who had never seen a dead body, had never touched anything, just went right up.
I've never been to the funeral homes as he had with his course at all. And he'd taken kids through to see all sorts of processes. And there she was, and there I was, and I decided to become involved.
So she went in and touched her cheek, I remember, and my knees just went like that.
He got very gray in the face.
Very gray. Of course, everyone's standing there, and they all know that I've been into death education, and how could I not do it, you know? So to save face, I forced myself to touch her, and I thought I was going to faint. I broke out, perspired, and all this business. It was good that I felt her, and I was glad that Jews didn't embalm, because I knew that an unembalmed body must feel differently, which I ultimately found out does. Well, then when we came back the following week, he had a better surprise for us. He had a body that was not embalmed and that we could practice on. Permission had been granted from the next of kin. And it was a man, so I had the honor of doing it. And it took some courage to force myself to touch him. But after I touched him the first time, all concern and fear just vanished, because all the myths and stories, what people tell you about the dead, just are not true. And the body was relatively warm. It was cooler than a live person. And There was no rigor mortis, and it was not a bad experience. In fact, it was relatively exhilarating when it was all done.
The first time there was a death, I just could not make it. The second time I was called, I was there. The purification took place 11 o'clock at night. I was with a group of people. There was a grad student who was 20, a young radiologist, in his 30s, a young attorney in his 30s, and the leader of the group was a man in his late 30s or early 40s. And we worked side by side.
Moshe Ben David, we ask your forgiveness for any indignity that's about to be caused you.
His lips are roses dripping, flowing myrrh. His arms are golden cylinders set with beryl. His appearance is like Lebanon, as selected the cedars. His mouth is most sweet, and he is altogether precious. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, the lovers of Jerusalem.
I found it to be a very moving experience.
He is pure, he is pure, he is pure.
And when I completed the task, I felt I had done something that at first seemed to be almost impossible for me to do. And it also, for a while, enabled me to look at life with a slightly different perspective.
The rabbis were very wise when they developed this process hundreds of years ago. What happens is that you develop a relationship with the body by touching it in such a way and having to wash it in a particularly prescribed manner, where you have to start on the right side first, then the left side, and then you do the back. By having to move the body certain ways, you almost embrace it because you pull it close to you so that it doesn't slide on the table. It's an intimate relationship, and you're confronted with the ultimate reality of you yourself will be there sometime. And you would hope that the people who do it for you do it as carefully and as genteelly as possible.
I think it's a myth to think it's unpleasant to look at someone dead. Each time that I've done a tahara, a ritual cleansing, it has been unpleasant in terms of being shocking the first view of the body when the sheet is taken off. And to first touch it is I have to say, okay, do it, and then do it.
And to the extent that people find themselves comfortable looking at a dead body, handling a dead body, this begins to wash away some of the denial process of death. People have confronted it and have transcended it themselves.
Well, you have to understand that I got involved in this as a result of my father's death a long time ago, which was about 6-7 years ago when my father died, and it was very traumatic for me and for, of course, the family. And my mother was born in Russia and has those attitudes that that death is something that you really don't talk about and discuss.
I think it's mostly a protection. You always
or protection,
protect your
or an
family
installation. I was always, protected for 33 years. I didn't know people died really. So right now, my mother knows what I'm doing, but in a sense, she approves but doesn't approve. She doesn't really understand why I would ever want to get involved with that. So she knows when she reads the obituary column and at the very bottom that the Chevra has done this particular body, that she assumes that either I did the man or that Debbie did it.
She's funny about it. She'll call up and she'll say, "Oh, you had a busy day, huh?" So, and I'll say, "Why?" She says, "Oh, I was reading the paper."
Death is a taboo subject in most families. It's not very pleasant to talk about. But when you eliminate the mysticism and get down to the realities of it, as we have done in our family, it brings the family closer together. I think it's brought our family closer together. Naturally, I have a lot of pride in having my son with me working on this. I think I should let Jeff speak on that, but I think it's maybe helped direct his future whole life in terms of what he wants to do. I ran around.
Well, yes. This has sort of helped me make a transition. I'm more interested in working with people directly on a social counseling sort of basis now, seeking graduate work in that. And part of it I'm interested in is death counseling. What my father says is really true. Is I've been to friends' parents' house, and they ask me, "What's going on? What are you doing? Well, how is this going to affect our community? Is it true that they do this? Is it true that this happens?" They don't know, and they finally have a chance to talk about it. And given a reason to talk about it, people can just start coming out with things that are important to them, that they want answers to, that they haven't ever found it appropriate to ask. They didn't know who it was appropriate to direct the questions to. And yet that the answers are always within any individual. You just make sense out of them and answer your own questions as such.
I like the fact that in our family we have come to a certain facing of death. I don't think you ever really can face death until it actually is imminent, but we've come to a point in my own family with my children where we can talk about it, and the children hear it talked about, and it's become a natural part of conversation. It's not something they fear. And I can't say that it was something that I feared, but it certainly wasn't unknown, and it won't be unknown to them, and they won't have fear on the basis of the unknown.
We think it's extremely important for us to talk to young people about death, so that the kinds of hang-ups that people have when they get to be adults, they just won't have it. My generation, people just were terrified of exposing young people to the idea of death. We find now that it's part of the high school curriculum in the city of Minneapolis. It's part of our confirmation class curriculum in our congregation. And we have discovered that youngsters of this age can handle it, are willing to handle it, and in the process of handling it, they've grown. And that's our obligation to the next generation, is to train them to be adults comfortable with what the adult life will bring them. And adult life will, unfortunately, bring them brushes with death, confrontations with death.
Hi, Scott. Good morning,
Morning, Betty. How's it coming? What's up here? Okay, good. Morning. David? Howie? Morning. 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 Look at Tom. Did very well.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Morning, Morris. Scott. What's here? Morning. Look at Morning.